Good evening, everybody, and welcome. On behalf of everyone here at Wilton Library and our Executive Director, Caroline Mandler, I'm glad to see you all here, and we're going to celebrate Women's History Month tonight by joining to hear a panel discussion with 5 women or 4 women, I'm not sure, from ASML Wilton. And what these women are going to do is they're going to share their pathways in STEM that span early inspiration to current work positions at the cutting edge of semiconductor manufacturing technology. These women are with ASML Wilton, and we owe them a large debt of gratitude for taking the time to put a program together for us tonight. Women remain underrepresented in STEM in the US, especially in physical sciences, computers, mathematical sciences, and engineering. Our panelists bring different experiences, including STEM disciplines, intersecting identities, and strategies for persistence and success to facilitate a conversation. ASML is one of the world's leading manufacturers of chip-making equipment. They design and manufacture the lithography machines that are essential component in chip manufacturing. They're headquartered in Veldhoven, Netherlands. ASML Wilton employs over 3,000 people and is an important competency center specializing in critical technologies that advance the performance of their lithography and metrology systems. It is also their only in-house optical fabrication site. Does anyone here know what book was the most borrowed and read fiction novel of 2023? Nobody from the library can answer that question. Any guess? Well, it was Lessons in Chemistry. So, and it took place, as most of you know, in the 1950s and the 1960s. Today, in 2024, that book resonated with so many people, which leads me to think of how much progress have we made from that time until today. And I think you're going to get a look into the answer for that question from our panel tonight. So without further ado, please welcome 4 women from ASML.
Hello, everybody. So before we do introductions, I just wanted to do a little bit of a follow-up on ASML in Wilton and sort of the relationship with women in that. So we work specifically on machines in the first step of the semiconductor manufacturing process. So we're on all of your phones, everything, anything with a chip, the little music on your dishwasher or anything like that, one of our chips is likely to be on it. And so what we do is we actually work with patterning of light on a specific resist, which is a chemical a semiconductor wafer, and we use that to pattern each layer, building up a circuit to build up that chip. And so we're on those steps. And so it's the first step, and there's lots of other steps in the semiconductor process, but that's what our company specifically works on. And we work specifically with nanometer level precision. And so if you can think about, it's about half the diameter of a DNA strand, or about, or a human hair is about 100,000 times nanometer level precision. So we work very, very small on the high-tech end of things, which is very exciting. We're at about 19% of our company is women currently, and we hired, I believe in 2023, 25% women. So as a company, ASML is very committed to growth of women in technology. Today we're going to really talk more from our personal experiences, so we'll make sure that we keep that sort of in mind. So this is not necessarily a reflection of ASML, but is our personal experiences. And ASML is very supportive of continuing to grow women in STEM within the company. So that's the context there. Just for an overview of the panel, we're going to do about 45 minutes of sort of general prompts about our pathways. And then at the end, we'll take questions for if you have any for us about sort of our paths, our backgrounds, some of our perspectives, and then if you have any specific questions about your experiences or your interests, we'd love to be able to answer some of those as well. So we'll start out with an introduction. We'll try to go over our titles, what our current roles are at ASML, and then some of our educational and career backgrounds.
Okay, hello everyone. We're so excited to be here tonight. My name is Caitlin Cachadorian. I grew up here in Connecticut, in Shelton, Connecticut, and I actually went to high school at Laurelton Hall in Milford. So a lot of people from ASML are from different states and countries, and so it's a little bit unique, and I feel lucky to be close to home here. But then I studied material science engineering at North Carolina State University, and I also completed 2 summer internships at ASML during my undergrad. So it was a great pathway to start working there full-time after I graduated. And I work on a customer escalations team, and my specific job title is a system or lithography system performance engineer, but essentially I really study or do material science engineering in my day-to-day role. So, yeah.
I'm Catherine Tracy. I grew up in Westchester, New York, and then went to undergrad at College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts, where I majored in chemistry. I then moved to Colorado, where I went to Colorado State University, and I got a PhD in physical chemistry. Along the way, doing a lot of research, laser research specifically. I did laser development for spectroscopy applications in my PhD. And then I did a postdoc in Switzerland at the University of Zurich. And then I moved back to the East Coast of the US, and I started a job at ASML in the research department. And so I'm a senior researcher, and I'm working on alignment research. So all of these fine features that are 100,000 times thinner than a human hair, they're essentially very, very, very small circuits. And when you print that layer, the next layer, the alignment of each layer on top of each other needs to be extremely precise. And so I'm working on alignment-based research. So looking at how in 10 or 15 years we can improve that alignment process. And there's a lot of tricks with light that you can use to do that. So my background although in chemistry, is really in light and how the physics of light works. So I use that for now working at ASML.
Hey, my name is Rachel Sneed. I studied chemical engineering at the University of Texas. I'm originally from Austin. And I got a creative writing minor there as well. And then I moved up here. This was kind of besides internships, this was like my first full-time role out of college. And at ASML, I'm a production engineer, which means my main responsibility is making sure that enough parts and machines make it out the door on time. And specifically, we've been talking about how small all the surfaces or all the components are in what we do. So my focus is on keeping that clean, because as small as it is, the smallest piece of dust or grease or anything like that can just throw off all of that alignment that we were discussing. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Catherine, and I am a senior mechatronics researcher. I work on our DUV systems, so that's sort of on the microcontroller, like littler circuits end of things. We're really driving towards Internet of Things, so a lot of the sort of internet connectivity, small scale, low power sensors are sort of what we're driving to make really cost effective. I try to control stuff at nanometer precision with big stages. So I work on taking the pattern that we want to put on the chip and then precisely aligning it relative to the light source, so that way we can get that level of precision that we need. I have a PhD from Cornell in aerospace engineering and my bachelor's degree from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, where I grew up. And both of those I actually pursued after my first bachelor's degree, which is in biochemistry and molecular biology. I went to a little women's college in Atlanta called Agnes Scott College. And after interning at the CDC and NASA, I fell in love with thinking about engineering. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the future prompts. But yeah, so I can talk a little bit too about later in your career considering engineering and hard STEM as well. So that's my background. So we're going to kind of dive in a little bit more into our paths now and think about what sort of inspired us to pursue our field of interest, whether that be major or our current position, and sort of the path that we pursued to get there in a little bit more detail.
Okay, so yeah, growing up, I was always really drawn towards the math and science classes. I was so bad at reading and history, so my parents would always have to help me because they're not math people, but I was pretty good at that. So going into high school, I took AP Chem and AP Physics, and just really gravitated more towards those classes, maybe like some of you guys. So it seemed engineering was really on the rise, and that was a great path and a great major to take, as it could be, I feel, really diverse. You could literally apply it to anything. So going into college, I was pretty sure I wanted to study engineering, but I wasn't quite sure which type. And at North Carolina State University, where I went, we actually had 18 different disciplines. And at first I was thinking like biomedical engineering, because I thought that could be interesting. And then I was thinking maybe environmental engineering, because I'm pretty passionate about the environment. But then I ended up, we had some intro courses where we were able to get like a little bit of an overview from all of the different disciplines. And I actually really fell in love with material science engineering, because it seemed like a great path where you could really take it in a lot of different directions. You can kind of do the environmental route, you can do textiles, you can do ceramics, metals, semiconductor materials, of course. So it just seemed like a great way to have a wide range of options as far as research and classes. And I also think something that is important to say is to really enjoy the department. Kind of, Catherine was saying that earlier, but it was one of the smaller disciplines, so it seemed you would have a lot smaller class sizes and some more one-on-one time with the professors, and it just seemed like they had a great collaborative spirit and camaraderie within that discipline. So I didn't necessarily go to school knowing that I wanted to, but after learning more about the department and talking with some of the professors, I really enjoyed it, and it has paved a good path for me to apply my skills now at ASML. And I should have said a tiny bit more what I did actually at ASML. I started first, but so in this complex machine that we make, there's a photo mask, or which we call a reticle, and it basically contains the pattern that gets printed onto the wafer to create the chip. And so my specific team deals with reticle defectivity. So kind of like Rachel was saying, any particles or really small nanometer scale particles that are on the reticle can cause defects on the wafer and yield loss for our customers, and even damage to both the reticle and the wafer that we're printing on. So my team deals with maintaining the cleanliness and root cause finding for any contamination on the reticle. So looking into the materials of the contamination that might end up there is how I use material science now in my daily work. So yeah, it's kind of my path.
So I was very interested in science starting in middle school. I had some great middle school teachers that really kind of engaged me with science in a way that I think was hands-on, and I really enjoyed it. And then I got to high school and I was very good at a lot of my classes. I loved reading. I loved my history classes. I took tons of APs across the board, all the ones that were offered at the time. And the class I did worst in was AP chemistry. And I got a 3. I got 5s on all my APs. It's out of 5 if you don't know. And that class I got the 3 in, my AP chemistry teacher said, you're good at a lot of things. You might want to think about not doing this. Like, this might not be for you. And I said, no, actually, that's what I'm going to do. It's the thing that I can't teach myself. So I went to undergrad and I was like, English major or chemistry major? And I went with chemistry major because I can read in my spare time. And then when I needed to choose what I was going to focus on, I did remember that teacher who told me I shouldn't study chemistry also always complained that the hardest part of chemistry was physical chemistry. And I said, you know what? I bet I could do that and I'll be great at it. So I studied physical chemistry out of spite. But it worked out really well. I got a PhD. I did research in undergrad that I loved. And it was all about lasers and how light interacted with materials. And I went and got my PhD developing lasers that would be better at it, interacting with materials. And then it was a really wonderful path that I had a lot of support in. But then I also had hiccups, and then the world kind of comes at you and you realize you're in a very male-dominated field when you turn up in a postdoc in Switzerland that's not as supportive as your wonderful PhD advisor or your great experience in your undergrad. So you get through that though, and I now have landed in a really wonderful company that's really supportive, and I'm with Caitlin, we're on the board for the Women's Employee Network at ASML, and we're working with a lot of really talented, smart, wonderful people. And so, yeah, it's worked out, but it's not always, the smoothest path.
Yeah, I think I struggled quite a bit, especially at the end of high school, deciding what I wanted to do. I feel like I knew people who knew they wanted to be scientists from like the minute they were born, and that was not me. I was similar to you. I liked a lot of different subjects. I thought I would be an English major. And yeah, it was hard for me to decide, and I was applying to different programs and stuff like that. But I did know that I loved chemistry. That was like my favorite in school, definitely. And once I got to college, or like once I was applying, I think I decided on engineering. Caitlin, kind of to what you said, I realized that it could be really versatile, and that although I wasn't sure what job I wanted to do with an engineering degree, I could hopefully go almost anywhere once I got a more clear picture of what I liked doing. And I've found that to be really true so far. And I went to a really big public university, and I loved that because that meant that all the other interests I had, I still got to pursue. I got to get minors and take a bunch of English classes and history classes and all that sort of stuff. So I thought that if I chose a path, it would like pigeonhole me, but it really hasn't been like that. And in college, I worked for a semiconductor company in Texas, but I did environment, health, and safety, so like more on the regulatory side of things, not so much like the hard science that I feel like I get to do now, working directly with the machines. But I also worked for a nonprofit that did like environmental research and reporting and stuff like that, and I loved that. Yeah, now that I'm at ASML, I think I'm happy with how creative the work is, which is something that I think I was looking for but didn't know it would be. Like that when we're troubleshooting an issue, we're like all throwing out ideas and we're trying things, and it's really like dynamic and fun. I didn't realize that. And then I still have time for, like, I also really love to write stories and stuff like that. And I feel like engineering has allowed me both to kind of like move to a new place and do that sort of thing, and also like helps me, like gives me the space to do my hobbies as well and like write in my free time, stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with a story as to sort of how I ended up coming into engineering. So I was actually one of those women where I actually did a Women in Engineering when I was very young. I think I was like maybe 6 or 7. It was like one of those Lego robotics things. And I wasn't assertive enough, or I was told I was not assertive enough. So I never actually got to play with the robot. And I don't know if anyone had that experience. And I think from that, I sort of really felt like I like to build stuff, and I had built stuff with my grandma and my mom at home, and then I come into this public space, and I didn't feel like I belonged. And, you know, granted, it was the 90s, so it's a little different now, and I think that, you know, where you create women-only spaces now, I think it's just that way there's more confidence built. It's better. But going into high school, I didn't really feel like I loved STEM. I was in Science Olympiad, and I took, you know, AP courses, some of them. I self-studied math, so I could take calculus in high school. And I liked STEM, and I knew I wanted to do something in STEM, but I didn't feel like engineering was going to be a space that I was going to fit in. But I love data. So I ended up interning in high school for the local public health department in epidemiology, specifically foodborne illness, and I loved it. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go to Atlanta, and I'm gonna work at CDC. And I did, and I loved it. But then I happened to see an internship at NASA for working on public health for astronauts, and I thought that was just too cool. I'll have to delay CDC, you know, permanent position for maybe a little bit of time so I can see what it was. And what I realized is that, oh no, in high school, I interned, my mentor was a mechanical engineer in college, and then I went to NASA, and even those in public health there were also engineers. And I realized I thought like an engineer. I wanted to solve problems. I wanted to build things better so that way I could help scientists better answer questions. So I came back and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm in the middle of my degree. I'm in my junior year. And I was like, okay, we're going to finish. But I managed to rearrange my classes so that way I could take a couple of community college classes just to make sure indeed that engineering was right for me. And I was lucky. I sort of targeted electrical engineering specifically because I knew that NASA and related aerospace contractors had a shortage of electrical engineers, and there were a lot of scholarship and contractor positions that I could pursue while getting my second degree. So after I finished, I went to the University of Minnesota, and I did my degree in about 2.5 years. And after that, I did my PhD at Cornell, and I was really lucky that I had a lot of interest from my previous research in biology, that engineers are, they're really supportive of if you like to answer research questions, they are pretty sure you're going to be able to handle another type of system. So I was relatively untested as far as engineering research. I did like some smaller class level projects. But once I got to my PhD, I was able to really dive in. And I actually worked on magnetic levitation for spacecraft. And then I had to sort of decide if I wanted to do sort of systems spacecraft or continue to do maglev. And I said, I really want to keep doing, sort of these really cool high precision systems. And so I ended up at ASML. So yeah, it was a little bit of an adjacent path. So now I think that this sort of feeds in as well. We're going to try to share a specific story about a challenge that we've faced that is related to some of our identities, including our identity as women, and what helped us to sort of persist in STEM.
Something that I think I dealt with, especially when I started working, and I think something specific to my department at ASML2 is it's a lot younger, so the culture is more casual. But I mean, I struggled a little bit. I guess I had some male coworkers who like made me feel uncomfortable at work, sort of thing. Just because I think what it came down to is like, and I think why it was so upsetting to me is because I think they were seeing me more on like a personal level than a professional level. And I really wanted to be recognized for my work. It was really upsetting to me that, and at that time I was grappling with like, how do you be a good engineer and like, you know, do good work, that sort of stuff. And so to kind of have it undermined in that way, I was just really upset by. But a few things helped me out of that. First of all, I have like, I think the network of like friends that I built both outside and inside work, people that I trust that I can talk to about things like that, was a big thing just to vent and get more understanding, that sort of thing. And then another was I realized, you know, I think at that time, like I didn't want to be known for that. I didn't want to, you know, make a big fuss or anything at work, but actually I realized when I don't feel like safe or comfortable in a space, I need to tell somebody. You know, I need to find someone I trust and let them know so I can get help. And I think the last thing too is I carry myself differently now. Like then I think I kind of attribute it to like people pleaseriness. Like I was so concerned with trying to understand what I thought someone wanted from me and then like kind of provide that for them either emotionally or at work or whatever it was. And now the first question that I ask myself is like, how do I feel about this situation? What do I want from this interaction? And that carries through into my work as well. I feel like I'm more direct in meetings and stuff like that, asking for like, hey, I actually need this specifically. Can you get that to me? So yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay. Yeah, I guess a challenge for. Can you repeat the question? Exactly. Sorry, I had an idea, but I want to make sure it's answering it.
Okay. So it's sort of share a story about a challenge that you've faced. Can be anywhere in your path.
Okay.
And how that is related to some of your identities, maybe including being a woman, and what has helped you persist.
Okay, perfect. That's what I thought it was. Yeah, so mine is, I guess, a little bit similar to Rachel. Probably some of you guys in high school, you have like you've always excelled, or you're just always such a high achiever or a bit of a perfectionist. And like in college, you're just studying hard, you're getting good grades, you're getting the scholarship, getting the internship, getting the award, the recognition, and then you get to work and it's like the real world, which I love ASML so much, but it's just a lot different than being in school. And since I had interned at ASML, I felt like I was a bit of like the student learning from my mentors, and then coming to being hired full time, you're just on the same playing field with everyone else, which was a little bit challenging because specifically on my team, like I think I'm one of two without a PhD, and I was just coming out of undergrad, so I was like just a 22-year-old little, well, what I felt like a child still, and everyone else is like over 30 to 35 with PhDs, so it wasn't necessarily imposter syndrome, and I don't think it was necessarily because I was a woman in engineering, but definitely we only have like 4 women on a team of like around 30, so I think that might have made it a little bit harder, but I just struggled a little bit with like standing up or speaking up in meetings or taking the initiative, mainly because I just feel like everyone was like so smart. Like I had these kind of rose-colored glasses on and just so impressed with everyone else that people kept telling me like, you're able to share your opinions, and just like feeling like everyone else had so much knowledge, but a lot of times my team members would kind of remind me like your opinions are valid. Like I just felt like I didn't have the same technical competence as everyone else because I only did an undergraduate degree. And now after being with ASML about a year and a half full time, it's shown me a lot that once you are working, it matters. Not that your schooling doesn't matter, but I feel like how you prove and present yourself and what you accomplish in work and the connections you make and what people share about you to other members of the team and managers is a lot more important. So kind of building up that confidence and getting good feedback. And also probably the thing that's helped me the number one is having a mentor. And she was actually my mentor while I was an intern. And luckily she's still my mentor now. And just really having those conversations. And she's been able to share a lot of her advice from similar things that she's gone through, needing to take a leadership position in a team of mainly men, and just different tips that she has for that has helped me a lot. So yeah, finding someone that you look up to who can give you some good tips, and also just trusting yourself and knowing your worth.
Yeah, so knowing your worth is always very important. So mine kind of leads kind of nicely from that. So I was very lucky my undergrad was in chemistry. My program in undergrad was probably about 50-50 male and females. I didn't see being a woman as being any different than being a man in that program. I was treated very well. It was very supportive atmosphere, and I didn't really see that like I was going into a field where I was going to be a minority. I then went to my PhD. I had a wonderful female advisor who really fostered about a 50-50 split in her lab and was extremely supportive of her female graduate students, such that with the exception of a couple of physics and electrical engineering classes that I took, where I was the only woman, I was very much surrounded by other really strong, impressive females that could be mentors and that were helping me guide me in my path. And I definitely thought I wanted to be continuing in this kind of like strong female academic route. I really didn't know anything outside of academia. I had never had any internships outside of academia. I had done internships since high school in academic research labs, and I didn't really realize that there was research outside of academia. I then went and did a postdoc. In my PhD, I did have a fun little incident where I gave a talk, my first ever talk at a conference, and I was the only woman in my session. I was giving a talk about laser development, and after I gave my talk, I had a professor come up to me and say, "You're a woman." And I said, "Very well spotted. I am, in fact, a woman." And he said, "Why are you in this session? Women typically don't present here." I said, "Well, I'm doing research on laser development. It seemed the appropriate session." And he was like, "Well, how did you get into that?" And I said, "Well, because I was interested in it." And I was just completely baffled. This was not an attitude I was used to. And then I got to my postdoc, and I did a postdoc in Switzerland, and I was working for the guy in my department, my field. He wrote the textbook. He was the person to work for, and that's why I went to work for him. And no one warned me that he was not a great person to work for. Was not supportive. He was not a great person to work for as a female. He pitted people against each other, and he created a really negative atmosphere. And that also, luckily, really coincided with a global pandemic. I was stuck in Switzerland for 18 months and didn't see my family and didn't really have a support network in a country I wasn't familiar with, and was being pitted against my fellow coworkers in a place where I didn't have support. And I found that there wasn't really in academia resources for that. There wasn't places to go to complain, to tell people that you didn't feel like you were being treated adequately, that you didn't feel like you were being treated fairly. And so I said, I need to leave. And I said, I'm going to treat this like I am a male. I am going to apply to every job in the metropolitan area that has some qualification that I might be qualified for, because I have been told that men go out into the world and apply to jobs that they may be like not at all qualified for, and they seem to get them, and women wait for the jobs that they're 100% qualified for. And I said, you know what, I'm not waiting for this job. I cannot afford to wait for this job. I need to get out of this country. And I applied to about 100 jobs in 2 weeks. And ASML was my second interview. It seemed like a really good fit. It seemed like a supportive environment, and I could still do research. So I ended up in a really great place, and I'm still doing research even though I'm not in academia, and I'm very happy about it.
So I'm going to go pivot to the next question, since we don't have a ton of time. Yes. And so we're going to kind of pivot on the upswing on that and sort of think about like, okay, now that we've had these experiences, what advice do we wish we would have had for our younger selves? And sort of in that context as well, what is important to know as a woman for being successful in STEM?
I wish, so this might just apply to my younger self, but I was really a perfectionist, and I would get really stressed about making the right decision and who's right, who decides if it's right anyway. But when it came to, I touched on this before, but when it came to life decisions and path, that really was a lot of pressure, because I felt like if I made a wrong move, then it would decide the rest of my life, which is not the case. But I almost wish I could just tell myself then to calm down, but I don't think I would have taken that advice. But what I've learned, I think, is that each decision kind of leads to the next decision. Like, even if I make a misstep, it gives me more information about what to do next and what I like. And that's even true at work. If no one has ever said that one of my ideas was stupid. It's more that we throw everything out there, and then instead of like sitting there pining, trying to figure out what's going to be the absolute, most amazing thing that's going to solve the problem, we try something, and then we get data, and then we go back and we like adjust based on what we found out. And sometimes it was right on the first shot, but most of the time it's not. So I've found that to be true in my life as well, that just kind of moving forward, doing kind of the small actions that I can to try something out and then go from there. That's really benefited me, and I wish I knew that when I was younger, for sure.
I think the one thing I learned in all of this was you need to advocate for yourself and not be afraid to advocate for yourself. If something doesn't feel right, or if you don't think that you're being treated adequately or fairly, that you need to advocate. And then if you need the inspiration to advocate for yourself, don't think of yourself as advocating for yourself. Think of yourself as advocating for the person who's near you who may not be able to speak up for themselves at this moment. And so I think that's part of why I'm now the co-president of the Women's Employee Network, because I now know I have a voice that I am not afraid to use. And there may be women that aren't ready or able to speak up for themselves. So it's important to me to speak up for myself, but also for the other people that are coming up behind me, because I don't want them to go through what I went through, and I don't want other people to feel like they're not worth it, or that they are in situations that they're not comfortable with. So yeah, speak up for yourself and speak up for others if you can't speak up for yourself.
Yeah, that was great. I think that the biggest piece of advice that someone has given me, actually my mentor, and I still really need to work on, so I'll give it to you guys, is that when you show up to work or college or school, or you're having a presentation or taking a test, kind of step into that ideal personality that you want to show up as. So kind of putting on a work personality. So especially for me, I feel like, not that I'm quiet, but I just feel like I'm more humble, and in a male-dominated field, that can be sometimes perceived as like you're not taking initiative, whereas I was just, listening to everyone with these great ideas, but sometimes you need to just step in and speak up and take the initiative to lead a project and, give the presentation or make the slides or do something a little bit bold. So kind of putting on that bold, confident personality, and not necessarily fake it till you make it, but, be that strong, bold woman that you see standing on the stage, like looking like she's killing it and owning it, because on the inside, she also might be nervous or feeling like she's not ready to give that presentation. But if you can just like my mentor said, when you walk through the doors of work, just turn into the like kind of that person that you want to be. And I think I was actually attending a virtual conference last week, and a big takeaway was this one woman was talking about integrity and how building integrity really builds trust. And I think another big takeaway from working is that it's not all about the technical skills, but really about kind of your soft skills and how people, the feedback that people give about you and what people say about you. Of course, we all are here because we have the technical skills. So if you're really building integrity and trust within your team, that's how I think you will get people to listen to you. And as a woman, that's what is extremely important, whereas a man might not need to build that trust or integrity. And I think a big takeaway for me, I'm really like social and extroverted, and I feel I can really build trust with my colleagues by just talking to them as people. I feel like we get so caught up in like the technical skills or what people have done or problems with the project, and just getting to know people, asking them about their family, their interests, their hobbies, like what are you doing this weekend? It can get people on your team to see you as a person and be like, oh yeah, Caitlin, she's so nice, or like friendly. And in addition to what you bring to the team and your technical skills, you can just be a smiling face. And I think that all goes into building integrity and building trust within your team, and then people will start to throw your name out there, and you'll get higher visibility just within the company. And so, yeah, so number one, just acting confident until you can be. And then number two, seeing the people that you're working with as people and not getting so hung up in like accolades or things like that. So,
Yeah, I think I'll echo that as well. I think now that I'm a little bit further in my career, I recognize that you can be human in your workplace. You don't have to be. I think when I was young, and my mother also echoed this story. She also left engineering, and she ended up having another great career in STEM. But I think it's this idea of being the good girl gets told a lot, and especially when you're working in high tech, where we sort of fail fast, we test fast. You can't be perfect, and you also can't always be perfect as a person. And also letting your colleagues, if you have a late test, and that's the test window that you might have, somebody might be coming in and they're not having the best day because it wasn't a great day, you have a design failure and you need to fix it. Knowing that you're working in a group like that, it allows you to be vulnerable with one another, and it's okay. And you don't have to be put on a face when you aren't ready. Certainly there's times where you need to be polished, but you can also let yourself not always be polished. And finding a workplace that sort of, and also a school environment that lets you do that and go through those sort of cycles really allows you to be sort of a well-rounded person and not burn out. So that's something I really wished I would have known. Yeah. So I think we're pretty close. We went slightly over on some of the panel questions. So we want to answer some of your questions and start a discussion with you. So yeah, let's get started.
Just raise your hands and I'll come to you with the microphone.
Okay, I'll make this quick because I feel like here's your audience. But when people of color talk about how they have succeeded, it's always you have to be twice as good. And I'm wondering, did you feel that in order to be accepted, you had to be twice as good?
So the question is related to sort of, how it's sort of on our paths, did we feel like we had to follow the common mantra of you have to be twice as good to be recognized and successful? And I'll say this, I certainly early on, I got that message that I had to be twice as good. But that sort of brings into what I just mentioned, where I felt like, and I'd love to hear the rest of your experience, but I felt like there are some things I'm twice as good at. But my male colleagues and my colleagues that have other identities are also like that. We're complex, and so when push comes to shove, and we're all trying to solve a problem, we all bring our twice as good at those areas. But I don't have to be twice as good at everything, and in fact, that's kind of a recipe for burning out. And you end up breaking things, and things take longer if you're trying to reach that. And I think, for me at least, that was one of the really big glass ceilings that I put in for myself in engineering, where I said, there's no way I can be twice as good doing this. The math is going to be too hard. The physics is going to be too hard. There's just too much to know. And when I let that sort of go, it was really freeing, and it allows me to be able to, be fast at solving problems rather than, being perfect.
Yeah.
Is there any other person that'd like? I don't want to take it away from somebody else. This is a fascinating program you presented so well. My question is, I know you're all very, very busy in your work. Does ASML provide occasions for you to get together as women or even with your male colleagues to talk about the things you've talked about with us here?
Yeah, so thank you. The great question and a timely question. So this past week was International Women's Day on Friday. And so the Women's Employee Network, which Caitlin and I are on the board of, organized a full day of programming. We had panel discussions with women leaders at ASML in the afternoon. We had a keynote speaker that came in, was an outside speaker. We had there were panel discussions that we watched that were coming from our corporate headquarters in Veldhoven in the Netherlands. So this was just one day. We have, as an employee network, we have over 300 members, and they're male and female members, and we have panel discussions, we have talk-back sessions, we have book clubs, which in the library is a great thing to promote. There's a book that's not impossible to get, The Exceptions, that we all read, and had the author, Kate Zernike, came and gave a talk. So we have a lot of opportunities, and they're really trying to promote a network of women that are supporting each other and are talking about how we can make this a better workplace for women and promote women staying and growing at ASML and hiring more women. Oh, you want to add something? Yeah, sure.
Catherine gave a great explanation, and I think the Women's Network is great, but just to talk to ASML as a whole, additionally, there's a big push for diversity and inclusion. So besides the Women's Network, we also have PROUD, which is like the LGBTQ plus community, and all of our networks welcome allies as well. So you don't need to necessarily identify as a woman to join the Women's Network. And then we have like Shades, which is the multicultural network, and then we have Next, which is like the younger people. We have veterans and parents. So it's really great, and all of these networks kind of collaborate. And I think within that, there's a beauty of different people that are from these different kind of minority groups all sharing similar experiences. And when they come together, they can really make ASML a better workplace for all of the groups, I think. So, yeah.
I was curious. Is there a program that you have where you go into the earlier grades of schools, the elementary schools, and talk to young girls especially about science and engineering?
Thank you for bringing that up. So we're actually pivoting to a more organized form. We've had each of our affinity groups have in the past done a lot of volunteer efforts, but now we're actually launching the ASML Academies program, and that's specifically going to focus on a few schools, including Danbury, Wilton, and a couple others, and so it's an opportunity for ASML to train our, folks in STEM, and then we get time during our workday to go and share our time with students, and ASML is supportive of that. And I think that's something that we're building as a competency. And in ASML, we talk a lot about growth and, sort of challenging ourselves to do better. And I think that's something that we're growing and we're improving. And hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll have a lot to show for that.
Thank you for being here and sharing your stories. I've been a woman in STEM for about 25 years, and one of the things that has been pivotal for me in the dialogue over the last year is what you mentioned, Caitlin. I think allies in changing the dialogue. And as I look out in the room, I'm blessed to see a couple of allies here, but we need more. If we have the dialogue just among ourselves, we're only talking to half of the population. So how are you all thinking about allyship?
So the Women's Employee Network at ASML, we're trying to really incorporate allies into how we're working. I mean, at a company with such low numbers of women, you kind of can't get anything done unless you have allies. So we have had panel discussions where the panelists are not all women. We have found that we had a work-life balance dialogue last December about how managers specifically can promote work-life balance in their teams. And we had 2 male managers and 2 female managers, and even the managers on that panel had a dialogue where people on the panel were learning something from each other about how one of the managers did not realize that sending emails at 10 p.m. at night might be making people feel like they had to reply to those emails at 10 p.m. at night. And one of the women on the panel was like, you do realize you can time your emails if you feel like you have to work at 10 p.m. at night, because that's how your timing works with your personal life. There's a thing in Microsoft Outlook where you can tell the email to actually send at 8 a.m. so no one feels the need to reply to it. And that manager learned something, and he took that with him out of that dialogue and kind of went and has actually been using that as far as I've been told. But we have executive sponsors. So we have people in upper management that are executive sponsors of our employee network that are working with us to promote things that will make it a better workplace for women, and promoting hiring of women into leadership positions, which is really important. So we have really great male allies, but we're looking to actually create a wider net of male allies, and I think that's always something that we can look for. Yeah. Anyone else?
And I think that additionally specific for International Women's Day, I saw that in the email from our Netherlands, from our headquarters. Actually, Peter Winnick, our CEO, was like the opening speaker for Women's Day there. So I think when these events and networks and these diversity efforts are getting promoted on such a big scale, just a random, or like any engineer is like, oh, our CEO might be talking about that. International Women's Day might be pretty important, So I think it really helps to be supportive with our one-on-one colleagues that we're just talking to within the office, but also like coming from, the people that we look up to and in those higher roles.
Yeah, I know. Even for International Women's Day specifically, we have fellows who are technical leaders in the company. They're some of the highest people in the company. And one of our fellows, Chip, he went up to a bunch of people that were not thinking they were going to attend the keynote speaker event for International Women's Day and said, "Why are you in this meeting? You should be going to the keynote speaker. That's more important." And they were in a technical review meeting, and he said, "This isn't as important. You should be in the keynote speaker event." So things like that are really important, and I think we're hoping that we have more things like that going forward.
Can anyone speak to whether there's still a disparity between salaries of men and women employees?
So I can speak a little bit to it, kind of in a broader context than just ASML. Yes, and I think from my stories that I was really lucky. I was in a PhD lab, and we were very transparent about our entry-level salaries. And I had colleagues that didn't, with different, less represented identities that didn't feel comfortable negotiating their salaries. And they didn't necessarily negotiate as much as they could have. And we really tried. And they said, "I just didn't feel comfortable at that time." And it's one of those challenging things where it is going to set you back. But you also have to do what makes you feel comfortable. So it's a balance. So yes, it's still a challenge, and we are trying within ASML to create that dialogue with one another and have more transparency. But it's something that is really company to company specific, unfortunately, and that makes overall all of us working together to make STEM parity better a bigger challenge. I know from my standpoint, this includes for internships. You can actually negotiate your internship salary, especially if you can't afford housing. It's really helpful to look at Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you should always be paid for your internships, especially in STEM. So I think just starting out, knowing that you are valuable in STEM in college and in high school can be really important.
Hi, it's great to see you all. I'm a chemist. I graduated from college, BS 63. I worked in industry and had children, and I would do experiments at their school, color pH experiments. And one day I was in the second grade, and they're like, their eyes are lighting up. And I got a letter from the teacher, made everyone write me a thank you note. So I got like 25 thank you notes from these second graders saying, "I didn't know chemistry was so much fun. Maybe I'll study it." So it was adorable. But I did it for all my children and my grandchildren, which was a big hit. I worked in industry while I had a family, and when I was 40, I decided to go to graduate school at the University of New Hampshire. And afterward, I worked in the electronics industry. Did a little bit of work in web process, which you're probably all familiar with. And anyway, I loved it. It was hard, it was intense, but it is so satisfying. And a lot of my friends are scientists, female scientists. So I still keep in touch. What's going on? It's very nice. It's so nice to see you all.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing your story.
What I'd like you to know, what I'd like you to tell these kids here is what kind of engineers do they hire at ASML? So you guys are chemical, aerospace. That one I can't. I guess that one makes no sense to me, but you understand that. But right? What is it? The whole gamut? Is it
All of it.
electrical? Is it? It's all of it.
All of
It's
it.
mechanical. It's all of that.
And not
Our SDEV is big.
SDEV, but it's it's in Wilton. It's mostly mechanical, electrical, but there's people in all chemistry, physics, not even engineering. There's math, there's material science, pretty much any major you can think of in STEM, with maybe the exception of biology and like environmental science, though that now also is at ASML as well. Environmental science, not biology. I think other than biology, I can't really think of a denomination of science that's not represented at ASML. And yeah.
Okay, just one other thing. If you were a student in college, ASML wants students after their sophomore year, is that what it is? So after 2 years of and then between their sophomore and junior year, and then again between their junior and senior year?
I could speak to, yeah. So that's exactly what I did. I applied during my sophomore year, and I interned during that summer. And some people might recommend that you do maybe your internships at different places to get a bit of experience somewhere else. But personally, I just really had a great experience at ASML, and they usually, if you do a good job, which of course everyone would, they'll offer you again for a second internship. So I did 2, and then got the offer for full time, which was great. But I'd say the typical is doing it after 2 years. And I know that there are a lot of schools that we do a lot of like college outreach fairs at. So I think they're mostly around here. Maybe so you went to one, right?
Yeah, they're all over the place. We do them all across the U.S. and. Well, we do a lot of hiring from probably Cornell and UConn, but we do it kind of from everywhere. But I will say that there's a lot of schools. We go to a lot of outreach at a lot of engineering programs, but also at across the gamut. There are certain sectors that you're not going to be hired into out of undergrad, and you probably won't get an internship as an undergrad. So like research, for example, you'd need probably at least a master's, if not a PhD. But that doesn't mean we don't sometimes have undergraduate interns. But yeah, I think generally you're gonna want to start after sophomore year looking for that.
Yeah, and I'll mention everybody can apply. So we have a lot of students that if you need to save money and you choose to transfer from community college, that summer in between community college and your and going to a 4-year college or university, we especially target that group. And you can cold apply on our website. Our HR people will review your resumes. So we've had people from, very, very small schools who have been very, very successful. And so, yeah, you should definitely keep ASML in mind. Thank you for being an ally.
I'd be honored to be. The question is this. I mean, the ASML experience sounds fantastic. When you talk with your friends who are with other companies, do you find this replicated anywhere else, or is this unique to ASML?
There are companies that I would say I would never work for. Most of them are run by a certain Elon Musk. But I don't know if you've heard that same story, but I have friends that have had really great experiences in startups. I have friends that are Googlers that seem to I think that might be a cult. Google might be a cult. I don't know if they actually like it or if it's just a cult, but it's a range of experiences. And what I always tell everyone when you're looking at undergraduate lab experience, when you're looking at graduate labs, when you're looking for jobs, is that no matter what company is and what the culture is, it's going to still be really manager dependent. Even at ASML, there are going to be managers that are going to be hard to work for. In graduate school, there are different advisors that can create completely different environments. So no matter how much you like the science, you can't just apply to something because you like the science. You also need to like the culture of where you're applying to. So I really like the culture and the science that I'm doing currently, but that may not be true for everyone at ASML. If there are different management styles that don't fit other people. But I would say really put an emphasis, and especially women, when you're looking at schools, jobs, graduate schools look at not just the science, but also the culture, because it's important and it will change how you live your life during your time in graduate school, in undergraduate, and in a job.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you so much for being here and giving us information that you can't pay for. So, thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for being here.